Hello, my darlings, and welcome back to Radio Wasteland, the best in paranormal talk radio. I'm your host, Chauncey Hallworth. This is my co-host, Kara Kittrick.
Hello.
Kara, do you have any news for us this evening?
Well, from a conspiracy standpoint, there's only one news story that matters right now. The Epstein thing, also known as God's greatest gift to conspiracy theorists. So for those of you who have been trapped in an abandoned mine shaft for a week and only just managed to escape to your car and are listening to this play on the radio, let's recap just the facts. So Jeffrey Epstein, a multimillionaire financier, was charged in July with sex trafficking of a minor and conspiracy. Epstein has been registered as a sex offender since 2008, when he served 18 months for soliciting prostitution with a minor. So, yeah, charming guy. Anyway, the case against him included literally 1 million pages of discovery and evidence, and given his extremely high-profile social circle, it was widely speculated that other important people would be implicated in similar crimes as well as a result of the case. However, with Epstein dead, the criminal case is now effectively over, and it's not known if any of that evidence will see the light of day. So, very convenient for anyone else who may have been involved, although there are civil cases that can still proceed. Now, for the conspiracy aspect of it, Epstein reportedly hung himself in his cell last week. Now, this is pretty remarkable because he'd tried to commit suicide 2 weeks earlier, but was taken off suicide watch after only 6 days, and then left without supervision for reasons that are unclear. Also, he wasn't housed alone. Or he was housed alone, not with a cellmate, as procedure required. So there's no evidence of foul play, but Epstein had a lot of incredibly powerful friends who, it is known, attended numerous trips and events with him where dodgy stuff happened. Most notably, for conspiracy purposes, former President Bill Clinton and current President Donald Trump. Both men who, to be frank, have been accused of sexual assault by multiple women and are known to have a dodgy relationship with the concept of consent. And, of course, both men say they have had nothing to do with him since his first sexual assault conviction. Anyway, given the bizarreness of the suicide, many high-profile people have speculated that a co-conspirator somehow arranged his death. Most notably, Trump himself retweeted speculation that perhaps the Clintons were responsible, much to the chagrin of the FBI. And people from both parties have called for a full investigation. On the other hand, the facility where Epstein was kept has been known to be extremely understaffed for quite some time, so it's possible the breaches in procedure had to do with that. Now, there are a million other facts that may or may not be pertinent. I'm just trying to get a rundown of the basics here, but it's likely enough that we will never know exactly how Epstein died or who his co-conspirators were. Back to you, Chauncey.
I'm surprised that's what you brought to the table, but I totally agree, and now that you did, I am totally not surprised, because when I saw this on the news last night and then again this morning, for some reason, let me preface this, that I'm one of those, I don't know, I'm having a hard time not using an expletive to explain myself, but prior to this recent election, I didn't really follow the news much. I mean, I followed it enough to know what was. Now I watch it twice a day.
Right.
I watch the evening news, and then I watch the first 15 minutes of Good Morning America.
Well, frankly, 2019 news is much more entertaining than 2010
Is it?
news.
I wouldn't know. I wasn't there. I mean, I was there, but I was watching,
News used to be boring.
Yeah. Oh, was it?
Yeah. But then, we elected Donald Trump, and
it got exciting.
Right. Even if nothing's happening, they can just, cut to what crazy thing did the president say today?
Well, hey,
we should burn all short people.
To be fair to the president, we can also cut to all the crazy responses that people follow up with that, It's crazy on all sides.
It's an endless font of content.
Yes, it is.
For
but
news organizations.
As soon as I saw this with Epstein, I was like, this guy was killed by Prince William or whoever
Prince Andrew.
Prince Andrew, it's like
another person with, high profile.
And
this guy.
And I looked into it because I was curious as to which way this was going to be spun. especially after Trump said the thing about Clinton. And both of the governor and the senator or representative that were called out by name as being in cahoots with him,
right,
are both Democrats. So
Yeah.
I was curious which way this is going to be spun, and it looks like
yeah, this thing goes super deep, and if you ever want proof that, like, regardless of party, the rich and powerful are basically just
Right.
kind of living in an eyes wide shut cesspool of
Right.
corruption and just evil, this is a good, like, case study in that, because
well, I think the rich people do it just kind of like fun. It's like 1984 where you're allies with Oceania, or you are Oceania, and now you're allies with East Asia, and now we're allies over here. They
Right,
probably just
exactly.
do that for recreational fun. I think they have a money plan for each situation.
yeah, I think that's basically the case.
But I agree there's a lot of stuff here. But Jeffrey Epstein himself doesn't seem to be a person that's interesting enough to warrant a lot of conspiracies outside of this. So all this paperwork, I think it's okay, here's one conspiracy that I can throw in and put my foot in my mouth. For the past couple of weeks, I've been making fun of Pizzagate as though it's the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard.
Right.
And then this Jeffrey Epstein thing happens. He's connected to a bunch of Democrats. Bill Clinton's pulled into this thing.
Right.
And I'm watching the news going, oh, my God, it's Pizzagate. This is really happening. It's like,
Now,
if we find out in this paperwork that he also trafficked through a pizza parlor, we're going to all go, oh, my God, it's Pizzagate.
Now, to be fair, like, the fact that Bill Clinton attended parties with this guy where there were probably, like, sex trafficked underage girls.
I'm aware of that. Not everybody there knew.
Right.
Yes.
Well, what I'm saying is, like, we knew that for a long time. It's just Epstein. Normal people didn't care about who Epstein was, but he's been a public figure for a long time, and it's
For
been
being shady like
known.
that?
Yeah, it's been known, but not, like, proven in a court of law, basically.
Right. I see.
Yeah, the shadiness involved with him and basically everyone he's come in contact with, that's kind of just been out there for a while. But
Well, it's like Harvey
really
Weinstein.
proven.
You look
Yeah.
back at stuff, and there's Seth MacFarlane making fun of him straight up at the Oscars years before he was the
Right.
big bad, because it was an open secret.
Right, because now we're in the Me Too era, and it's like, oh, we should, start prosecuting some of these people,
Right.
Who have been blatantly committing crimes for 40 years.
Right, yeah. I heard some comedian, they were referring to racism, but I think it applies to a lot of things where he or she was telling the people to just calm down, this stuff was racist before you figured it out.
Right.
Basically,
Yeah,
this was going on
exactly.
before we figured it
Yeah.
out. All right. That's enough of the news. Let's get to the fun stuff. Our guest tonight, we have Lyle Blackburn, and we're talking about his book, Lizardman, The True Story of the Bishopville Monster.
Yeah. Well,
Now
talking
this-
about monsters.
Yeah, totally. Going
do it.
from real-life monsters to even more real-life monsters.
Going from cold-blooded reptiles to friendly cryptids.
Right. Well, I really like the cryptids I don't know about, so this should be pretty exciting. And Lyle
Yeah, I'm into
Blackburn
it.
is a bit of a name in the cryptid community. So, this is adding to my street cred, Lyle. So thank you. I appreciate it. And we're going to break. And when we come back, we got Lyle Blackburn.
Visit Radio Wasteland at Instagram at instagram.com/Radio Wasteland.
All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest, Lyle Blackburn. Lyle, do we have you there with us?
I'm here.
All right. Well, we're really excited to have you on. Andrea, who you've spoken with up until now, she does the booking for our show. She geeked out hardcore when she found out that you were coming on the show. So you're definitely adding some street cred to us. We're pretty excited to have
Yeah.
this, and we're always excited to have somebody talk about a cryptid other than Bigfoot, other than this stuff, but it's so hard to find credible people. So I'm really happy that we have you on here, and really excited to talk about your new book.
Right, I appreciate it.
how did you first decide to go after the lizard man? I mean, what an odd sort of off the beaten track topic. What drew you in that direction?
Well, it's kind of just happenstance in a way, although I was familiar with the story of this alleged lizard man in South Carolina. And after my first book, The Beast of Boggy Creek, it did well, and I thought, okay, this is good stuff. What would I want to do next? So as any rational person would do, I went on what I called a swamp tour, which entailed going to a variety of swamp areas in the southeast United States, which have legends and monsters and things associated with them. And while I was in Bishopville, South Carolina, visiting Skateboard Swamp, I met with a retired sheriff there and some people that had been involved in this case that was back in the 80s, and I found out there was a lot more to it. There was some police documents involved, and some the police had been involved in this case where, a lot of these type things get dismissed by officials. But and then really what happened was I was there for a while, kind of interviewing people along with my associate Cindy Lee, and suddenly the newspaper showed up, and later I saw this article in the paper that says writer plans to write book on lizard man. So I thought, well, I guess I'm writing a book on the lizard man. So,
you got suckered into it.
So it just sort of happened that way, but it's truly a case that I was fascinated with, and one, like I said, I'd read about in bits and pieces in various books, but not one that had been explored at length.
So this is not something you had an experience with. This is something you went in as a journalist and tried to learn as much as you can about.
Right, and in all the cases, my books are just basically, I've something between an investigative journalist and cryptozoologist, just somebody who's had a lifelong interest and fascination for people claiming to see what is essentially real-life monsters. And so, I'd love to investigate these cases and sort of, offer the facts and my observations from going to these places.
Well, I figured that was the case, but I wanted to precursor my next question with that, and that is, what do these people say this thing looks like? Obviously a lizard on some level, but,
right.
What are they saying?
Yeah, the descriptions vary somewhat, but in general, it's described as being humanoid, anthropomorphic. That means it stands on two legs like a human. It's approximately 6 or 7 feet tall. It's either brownish or green and looks to be covered in scales. It's got allegedly has 3 long fingers with long nails, and it can run quickly and move through the swamps area there near South Carolina, and it was heavily covered by newspapers back in 1988 when this was all going on, and some of the drawings, of course, in the newspapers are really goofy, but if you look at what the witnesses described, it's a lot more chilling, and even some of them said they thought it had hair or could even resemble like a Sasquatch in some ways. So there was, people get quick glances of this, and it's something unexpected. So like any eyewitnesses, they're grasping what they can see in that time period and describing that.
Yeah, I could see hair covered in dried mud breaking apart to appear as scales, so I could see it going.
Right.
Yeah. So, how many sightings? How many sightings are we dealing with?
In this case, there was roughly a dozen within a time period of a couple of years. Most of those occurred in the vicinity of 1988. That's kind of when it got in the papers, and that resulted from a kind of a scary incident in which a young man said he was attacked by this thing, and then as things come in the papers, then you often have people come forward and say, well, a couple of years ago I saw something like what he's describing, but I didn't know, I didn't run out and tell the newspaper. So there was, preceding encounters, as well as some that went on for the next couple of years. But it wasn't like, hundreds or anything like that. It was a very concentrated, time period and concentrated case.
Interesting. Are people still seeing this thing?
There's really been no, what I call credible reports out of the Bishopville area in many, many years. Occasionally there's a few things that come up, but however, I do get reports of, reptilian type humanoids, or lizardmen as they're kind of classified in cryptozoology. I get those, and those range from states like Mississippi to Texas, and other places. So they're not necessarily combined to that one case, but it's definitely not like Bigfoot. You just kind of tend to have a lot of sightings of Bigfoot, whereas reptilian type humanoids are far more rare.
Yeah. So, the reptilian humanoid cryptid. This is the first time that I had heard of one outside of the ufology aspect. Where they feel that there's the reptilians and they're
the Greys and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, they kind of it's like V. Remember V from the 80s with the masks?
Oh,
and
yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. So that's kind of how I feel about ufology, reptilians. But I thought this one was really interesting, of course, because I love the swamp thing. I like it. I like myself some doom and gloom, and the swamp seems like the perfect place for that, and a perfect place for these things to hide. In any of these sightings, was there close-up contact?
There was in the case that I mentioned before, this young man Christopher Davis, and this was June 29th, 1988. He was getting off work. He worked at a fast food restaurant in Bishopville, which is a really small town there in Lee County, South Carolina. And it was like 2 a.m., and he had to drive through this kind of desolate section of Scapor Swamp en route to his home. And when he was out there, he had the unfortunate thing of having a flat tire, and so he kind of pulled off the road. And he's too far to walk home, and it's super scary out there anyway, regardless of a lizardman. And he had just finished changing his tire, and he was putting the stuff, the blown out tire in the trunk, and he looked up, and just in the moonlight he could see something coming at him through the fennel grass there, and it was on two legs. And of course he first thought it was a person, which is scary anyways, because he's in the middle of a swampy area. And but as it got closer, he felt or saw that it didn't look human. It looked to be scaly, and had the three fingers, and no hair. And at that point he just jumped into the car, started it up, and started trying to take off. And this thing, it was pretty quick and reached him by then, and was reaching in to try to grab him. And he, hit the gas pedal and was racing off, and the thing kind of fell off the car and was still in pursuit of him on the road as he drove off, and jumped on the back of the car and, tried to get in there. And, he managed to swerve a few times and lose it and blaze off into the night. When he got home, he runs in, he's left the car running, ran in, and was in a complete state of panic. And his father, assessed the story and so forth. And from there, they just kind of kept it quiet, because they just really didn't know what to do about it. And it wasn't until 2 weeks later that there was a incident involving a car that was basically looked like it had been mauled by an animal, that made it in the newspapers, and people had mentioned perhaps it's this lizard man. It was something that people had been talking about in the area. And then this Christopher Davis went forward to the sheriff at that point, and that's when things really sort of went kind of crazy.
Well, this is a perfect segue, because we're about to come up on break, and when we come back, I wanted to ask you specifically what the law enforcement was in looking into this. So we're going to go to break. You're listening to Lyle Blackburn. We're talking about the lizard man of... Oh, no. I lost track of where our lizard man is from. Bishopville?
Bishopville, South Carolina.
Bishopville, South Carolina. It's terrifying, man. The chase in the swamp, absolutely terrifying. All right, come on back.
And don't forget to follow Radio Wasteland on Facebook at facebook.com/radiowasteland.us.
All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland, and we're talking to Lyle Blackburn about his book, Lizardman, The True Story of the Bishopville Monster. So when we left off in our discussion on this, you were talking about how at that point they had contacted the sheriff, and I'm always really interested in how these local, we know that the national situations don't take a lot of these things very seriously, but you would think that the local constituents would, or the local sheriff would, due to his constituents. How did they deal with this?
Well, it was, like I said, it was interesting the way they got involved, and when they had gone to when the sheriff's department responded to that call about the car that had been possibly mauled by an animal, they couldn't make much sense of it, and it truly did look like some animals had been fighting on it, or something had scratched it up, and the people that had reported it were sincere. And during the process, Sheriff Liston Truesdale, who was the sheriff of Lee County at the time, was there, and as he was leaving, somebody said, "Well, maybe it was the Lizardman." And he said, "What Lizardman? What do you mean?" This local proceeded to tell him that people had been reporting for some time, or seeing something lurking in the swamps, that they had given it this name, Lizardman. And of course he thought, "Oh, okay, whatever," and went on his business. But then when Christopher Davis came in there 2 weeks later with his father and told the story about this thing attacking him, Truesdale felt quite sure that the kid was telling the truth. Something happened to him, something truly bizarre, and he didn't necessarily believe that it was a, quote-unquote Lizardman, but he felt that it had enough merit that he should try to, elicit more reports from other locals who may have seen this thing. So he kind of put the word out, if anybody's seen this or had any experiences, come forward, and several people did. And, again, he felt these people were truthful, and there was something to it. And then once it became, media, heavily covered by the media, which included local papers and a wider range of South Carolina papers, and it got in reporters like Dan Rather were coming there. This caused all kinds of problems. You get all these people running through the woods down there trying to hunt this, and hundreds of people at the skateboard bridge. So ultimately he kept a file on it and took it seriously, in that he was afraid somebody would be hurt, even if it was just a hoax. And I visited with him at length. I looked through all the police files, and he had taken some of these witnesses. A whole family had seen it once while driving, and he separated them and had them all write down what they had seen. So I was able to read the affidavits from the witnesses, not interviewing them, so many years later, but literally days after hearing their recollections. So, that was interesting, and I think Sheriff Truesdale truly wanted to solve the mystery, and he never really did, but so it was kind of unique that there was so much involvement with the law officials.
So your other book, The Beast of Boggy Creek, I'm not familiar with that one, but it seems to be somewhat swampy in nature as well. What is it about the swamp? Is it just the dark and hard to navigate terrain that you think draws these sorts of stories and possibilities to them?
Well, it could be that places like that, inspire one's imaginations, or that naturally, if there were unknown creatures or things we couldn't explain, those would be the more off the beaten path locations where they would be able to exist in relative sanctuary. And The Beast of Boggy Creek was written, it's a story there was an old movie called The Legend of Boggy Creek, which was a huge sensation in the 1970s, and it is in a kind of a swampy southern Arkansas area. Yeah. And I've always just had a fascination, I think, for those kind of places, and I'm from Texas, and Louisiana's not far. I've just love those, so I really love the stories that have come out of there, and there's some really spooky monster tales. Whether the creatures can be proven or not, just the phenomenon of people seeing things in these spooky environments is just fascinating.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's like it gets my imagination going. As soon as I see these things, I'm just all, yeah, of course there's a monster in there. Look at this place. It's like absolutely terrifying. I don't want to go in there. It's like bugs and just and just crazy scary. So of the people that you interviewed, talked to, read about, and put together for the book, do you feel that there's a lot of credibility there? Do you feel that most of them are firm believers that there's something out there?
Yeah, I felt the ones that I was, that were still alive, or the ones that could be located. One of those was a crop duster by the name of Frank Mitchell that had seen it cross his runway, which is basically a field behind his house. And, I went to the location, visited with him, and I saw no reason why he would make up such a story. And, he had also been to the police about this, and you jeopardize your reputation if you're going to come forward and say you've seen something like this. But he thought, I don't really care. I'm just going to tell people what I saw, and so in those cases, I felt that he saw something that can't be explained, and certainly in the case of Christopher Davis, who was later inexplicably murdered, which is kind of a twist to the whole thing. But he's not alive, obviously, to interview. But he took a lie detector, and I have the police reports, and the sheriff. I mean, this sheriff was trained in Quantico by FBI standards, and he said, "Man, this kid, something happened to that kid." And so while we can't prove what they saw, I can surely say that at least the people I read about or were able to interview truly experienced something weird.
And do you feel that the sheriff was ever became a believer?
He seemed to kind of, I don't know. I think in his older age, I think he's had some effect. He talked about the lizardman with some familiarity or affection, really, for it, almost as if it, the lizardman, which just had almost become real, just literally because of the reports and the things that had happened. And you could very much tell that it bothered him in a way that it was something he couldn't really solve one way or another. And that I think he liked the mystery. I mean, he's a policeman, and I'm sure, trying to solve cases or what he's all about. So, I couldn't quite tell if he completely believed there was a lizard man, but he did believe that the people had seen something. There was no doubt about that. He stated that.
Yeah, well, I definitely understand. I have those feelings as well. It's like, Bigfoot is a prime example of this, that you can meet so many people that you love, you care about, credible people in your lives, and they have stories, and you can only hear it so many times before you either have to decide that they are absolutely nuts or that something really happened to them,
Right. I've interviewed, quite a number of people over the years, and I've been doing this more than a decade, and you quickly kind of are able to suss out the people whose stories just seem either too incredible, or they've had just one too many paranormal experience, or they're just not quite believable. And then there's, even if it's just a handful of people they're just so credible, and such ordinary, average people who had, a fairly clear sighting of something that just can't be explained. And if only one of those witnesses saw what they said they saw, then that is enough to say that whatever these things are out there.
Yeah. All right. We're coming up on break here, but I really like the way the one thing I've thought about a lot of those, but the one too many paranormal experiences is one of the things when I'm listening to.
It's a red flag.
Yeah, it is a good red flag. All right. You're listening to Lyle Blackburn here on Radio Wasteland, and we are talking about his book, Lizardman, The True Story of the Bishopville Monster. And when we come back, we're going to have more Lyle Blackburn, so, stick around.
You're listening to Radio Wasteland with Chauncey and Kara. Find all our shows and archives by visiting Radio Wasteland at radiowasteland.us.
All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest Lyle Blackburn. We have been talking about his book, Lizardman, The True Story of the Bishopville Monster. But I just want to talk to you a little bit about cryptids in general. What is it about us that really draws us towards this? Because there are so many people out there whose argument is that this is just impossible. This is just impossible that a Bigfoot could be living out there and we didn't find it or something like that. What keeps us going? I can't let it go. I still find it interesting every day. What do you think keeps society interested?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. I think it's ingrained in us to be fascinated or frightened or about things that may be out there, about things we don't understand, and monsters in the woods. I mean, that dates back to the oldest of tales and things that have scared people in the dark, and just that people report these kind of things in modern society. The lizard man, almost like Creature from the Black Lagoon, or Bigfoot, this sort of wild man or ape man living in the woods. It just appeals to our base nature of something that we just we can't let go. We just we want it resolved. We want proof, or we want to be able to say it definitely doesn't exist. But so far, the case just goes either way. We can't disprove it. We can't prove it. Yet we do have some credible, solid witnesses, and an occasional photo or video that looks promising, and it's just sort of like the carrot that dangles in front of us that we keep chasing perpetually until, I suppose, one of these comes out of the woods, if possible.
Yeah, well, while we haven't found any humanoid ones, we have found actual cryptids in science, haven't we? We've actually found animals that we thought were extinct that were back, or animals that there were sightings of that we ended up figuring out. So it's not too far outside of the realm of possibility as well, is it?
Oh, definitely. I mean, things like the okapi or the coelacanth, and, things in the sea, of course, there's a lot more area. And, even the mountain gorilla was basically a cryptid at one point. It was something people had seen and were telling others, and others didn't believe it until one was shot. And, so it's not in the too distant past in which big animals were out there that we didn't know of. And, people tend to think, this is the modern world. There's cell phones and this and that, game cameras everywhere. But I've been in places, in some of these swamps and in mountains and areas where there is just woods after woods and dense, swampy, rugged bottomlands that people just aren't. And if one was to go out there and be dropped into these places, people would soon realize that it's not that hard for something to be 20 yards away and just to hide in the shadows. You'd never see it if it didn't want you to, So it's not. It seems improbable, but it's not impossible.
Yeah, that's been one of my thoughts too. Is that look how good animals are at hiding from us. And they're not even as smart as a humanoid or a monkey, and they can hide like nobody's business. So if something really wanted to not be found, it probably could get away with it for quite some time.
I think so. I mean, this business about, there's no big bones for Bigfoot and this and that, but you have to look at the populations of like in Washington State, how many bears are there? Well, there's thousands and thousands of bears, and yet it's very rare to even run across the bones of a bear. And if you consider there could be a viable population of that state of, say, 250 Sasquatch, it's like, what are the chances you're going to find the bones of one of them if you don't run across bones of thousands of possible bears? So
that's a good
once
point.
it's in perspective, it becomes, it could be possible.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, so coming up for you, you have a couple of events here, September 6th and 8th, Horror Hound Weekend in Indianapolis, October 4th and 5th, Bama Bigfoot Conference in Houston, Alabama, October 17th at Claiborne Parish Public Library in Homer, Louisiana, and October 18th and 19th, Texas Bigfoot Conference. You're a busy guy, Lyle.
Yeah, it's a busy thing, but it's super fun, and I especially love to get out there and do some of these events and to share the stories of these cases and to talk to witnesses and people who have seen things or people who are interested in this.
Yeah, Kara and I have been trying to find some sort of event to go to so that we can be a part of it. We're both kind of shut-ins, though. It's like that's the draw of radio, I think. You can talk and nobody's actually there, but. So what's next for you? What's your next cryptid you're chasing down, or have you not found the inspiration yet?
Well, no, I've been working on, I also work with a company called Small Town Monsters that makes documentaries about these sort of things, and our new one coming out is on Momo the Missouri Monster, kind of a famous Missouri-type Bigfoot case that'll come out in late September, and I am basically on screen, and I am the narrator of many of their movies, and those can be found like on Amazon Prime and places like that. And so I've been working on that and kind of formulating the idea for a new book, which, of course, is no surprise that it will deal with swampy and spooky places.
I like that. And also it looks like you wrote a book about Momo also, The Strange Case of the Missouri Monster.
Yes, that book came out in March and was sort of the precursor to the movie that we've made. So yeah, this has kind of been a lot of Momo going on this year.
Yeah, well, there's going to be Momo for you. All right, so let's see. Before we let you go about your way, I want to thank you very much for being on the show. I want to remind the audience that your book that we were talking about here, if you want to find out more, is Lizardman, The True Story of the Bishopville Monster by Lyle Blackburn. And you can get it at lyleblackburn.com. You can also get it at Amazon. And, this has been a lot of fun, and I'd love to have you on again to talk about the Boggy Creek Monster. Because that's, outside of the movie, I know nothing of it.
Yeah. We can't get enough.
I can't.
That's true. Anytime. I enjoyed it, and just have me back anytime. No problem.
All right. Well, listening to Lyle Blackburn here on Radio Wasteland as we've been talking about his book, Lizardman, The True Story of the Bishopville Monster. You can get a copy of that at Amazon.com or LyleBlackburn.com. That's LYLEBLACKBURN.com. And, of course, as always, you've been listening to Chauncey and Kara. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland. We have been listening to our guest, Lyle Blackburn, as we've been discussing his book, Lizardman, The True Story of the Bishopville Monster.
Indeed.
Kara, are you a believer now?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're kind of on board for, you're kind of like, you're all about standing up for the little guy.
Yeah.
Basically, those cryptids that aren't getting the love.
It's weird. Those are the ones that I find the most credible. Like, Bigfoot is like, okay, everyone's seen a Bigfoot sighting, whatever. Tell me about the glowing lights you saw in the sky. But, the weird, like, rash of sightings in a small town of something that's, like, peculiar yet consistent.
Right. Yeah.
That, I find that really compelling. And, this is, what he was describing was a lot like the Beast of Bray Road, a lot like Mothman at Point Pleasant.
Right.
Because I can't go one show without bringing up Mothman.
Totally.
But it is relevant, because it was like that. And even the story where the lizardman's chasing this guy in the car, that exact same thing happened with Mothman. So.
Yeah, what was our Mothman guest's name?
Lon Strickler.
Yeah, Lon Strickler. Remember his story?
Oh,
that
God.
he told of his Mothman experience. It was very similar. Like, you see it in the darkness, you think it's a man at first, and then you realize that you might have...
there's got wings.
Right, that you might have just peed a little. It's like you're just out, Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. And me too. That's the stuff I love about these things, that it's not opened up to the entire population. So when
that makes it much more credible for me.
It does, because it takes a creative nut job to make this stuff up.
Yes.
And when you open up a story to
the whole world, you're going to get a certain percentage of those.
Of course, you have access to crazy nut jobs. But
and
when
hoaxsters and all kinds
all
of
this
things.
stuff, right? But when you're in a small town and it's people who are working and living their lives, there might be one or two crazy nut jobs up in there, creative ones.
Right. I think Bishopville in the 80s, and not just Bishopville, but some of the small towns he was talking about, we're talking about a few thousand people.
Right. Yeah.
So it's out of a few thousand, 12 people saw a lizard man in the span of a couple of years. That to me is actually that's statistically very significant.
Right, and plus you have to have the trifecta. You have to be creative.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be a nut.
Right.
And you have to be willing to throw yourself at the feet of the media. To find that in a small town is
12 people that match that profile.
Right, exactly. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of creative people there, but as far as nuts and people willing to throw themselves to complete the trifecta.
Right,
Yeah.
So it starts to become, a little less plausible, and it starts to become maybe a little more plausible that it
I agree.
was a lizard man. Or, a guy in a lizard suit. But that's kind of freaky too, to be honest.
Totally. Yeah.
And this guy in the lizard suit did somehow keep pace with a car. So
solely, guy running around terrifying people in a lizard suit. I'm on board with that. That's a show itself. I'd happily have that show.
Honestly, I think at that point, just the person who's doing that is a cryptid.
Totally.
Okay, they're a human being.
Right.
We know where they came from. But their mind is such a mystery at that point that they are basically a cryptid.
That's beyond the trifecta, man. That's creative, totally nuts, willing to throw themselves at the foot of the media, and a method actor.
Yeah.
How do you get all that in one person?
And willing to, run around in the woods where there are men with guns.
Totally. Survivalist.
Yeah, exactly.
Like John Rambo, creative John Rambo, that's also nuts. And
I'm just going to run around in a lizard suit until 12 people see me. It's okay.
Now, this is off topic of that, but I have to say that this did remind me of something that I'm very depressed about.
Oh, no.
And this is my TV, how I feel about my shows, how I feel about my movies. Swamp Thing, the TV show, is over.
God. I saw it.
And
I know.
It's so good.
It's crushing.
And I still got 3 episodes that I'm slowly watching because I know when it's over, it's over. And there's...
Yeah.
And I was just really upset because, he was right. Lyle, our guest, was right. There is something about the swamp.
I know.
That is
and we don't have swamps
magical
here.
and
I've never really lived
around
swamps. So
I haven't either.
Whenever I've been near them, I'm like, whoa, what is this place?
Oh, totally.
This is not of this earth. It's just a totally alien biome to...
Yeah, it's primordial ooze with trees coming out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm fairly certain I'm not swamp material.
No. No, I
what
don't...
they need is a test, how long will you survive in the swamp by yourself?
Yeah.
And that's a no for me. I think I've been overly domesticated. Maybe when I was younger, but now I've just been married for so long that...
I think the test is that they give you wet socks, wet muddy socks, and they put you in
I'm out already.
They put you in a sauna with an alligator.
Right. Yeah.
And like you've got to survive for an hour or something, and if you can do that, then you're allowed into Louisiana.
Right,
know?
Totally. What we do is first we give you wet socks, then we give you malaria, then we huck you in the sauna with the alligator.
Yeah. So, the 120-degree days, the roiling infernos that consume entire neighborhoods.
Right.
I'm good with that. I grew up with that, but I can't do humid.
Yeah, like my wife was very much self-raised. She raised herself. She had really rough conditions. It's her story to tell. I don't want to go into it, but basically now it's like if people ask her to go camping, she's all, no. Now I've had enough of that. I've had enough of camping. The only thing she'll do is she's a glamper. She's willing to glamp.
I don't know what glamping is.
Glamour camping? Like fancy
what
camping?
What even is that? Is that
it's
just
like fancy camping.
Camping with glitter and like circular sunglasses?
Yes. Yeah, that's it. If it's magical, there's some house music and Cabana Boys or something like that, she's down with the camping experience. But outside of glamping, she's not having it. And I think that might be how I feel about the swamp.
Yeah, it's a nice place to visit on the internet and not in person.
Right, for an hour while passing through,
Exactly.
going to a hotel.
Yeah.
All right, you're listening to Radio Wasteland. Come on back and we'll tell you what we got going on next week. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland. Kara, do you know what we have going on next week?
I don't, but the fact that you're asking me makes me think it's something relevant to my interests. So.
It's not.
Oh, dang it.
Our guest is me.
Ah, yes, we're talking about artificial intelligence.
I've been doing a lot of research about artificial intelligence and if it's going to be the death of humanity or not, and if people are overreacting.
I'll be asking the questions. You'll be telling me the answers. I'll be bursting into hysterics. It's going to be a good time.
Why will you burst into hysterics?
Because you're going to tell me that the AIs are going to, go rogue and turn us all into paperclips. They're going to be like, our prime directive is to make paperclips for the paperclip factory, and they're going to convert the entire mass of the planet into paperclips, and then we'll all be dead.
Well, that's not a far cry. So, without giving away what we talk about next week, I instead will talk about an anime. There's an anime called it's
nice
manga
segue.
Originally. They made a movie of it on Netflix. It's called Blame.
It's better in the original Japanese.
I guess it's pronounced Blam, but it's spelt Blame.
Okay.
And it's basically about a future where we built machines and we couldn't stop them, and they basically have built the Earth into a giant Dyson sphere that's actually gone out well past the moon, and each level is the size of skyscraper-style buildings, and there's hundreds upon hundreds of levels, and humanity is just trying to exist in there as the machines try to wipe them out in order to complete the job that they were built to do. And it's like totally cool, totally awesome anime. You should check it out.
The presence of these flesh beasts is inefficient to our cookie-making operation.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about this, and, I don't want to burn too much of it up, it's, I heard somebody compare it to if you were building something in your yard, and there was, let's say you're building a wall, and there was an ant mound in the way, what would you do?
I would leave the ant mound alone and treasure it forever and give them candy.
Apparently, you are truly a human because you are an adept liar. You would build the wall.
I would destroy the ant mound,
right.
Yes.
And it's more like that. We try to give machines this nefarious intent, but they don't. There is no nefarious intent. There is.
Right.
That's in the way. We're going to complete
Yeah, that's something that always kind of bothered me about, like, the Terminator movies. It was very, like, Skynet is basically an eco-terrorist. He's like, the humans are destroying their habitat. They do not deserve to live. The humans are too violent and unpredictable. Like, honestly, that's a very human thing to think. But it would honestly be more like this process would be, 0.5% more efficient if there were no people. So, yeah,
Right.
I crunched the numbers. Let's get rid of them.
Right. Yep.
It's
basically when that anybody out there who works for a corporation or a company and the efficiency manager comes in and everybody gets all scared.
Right.
That's
Like,
it. It's the
This
efficiency.
place
manager.
would run smoother with no employees.
If Ned wasn't here.
Exactly.
Ned is gone now. We're going to replace Ned
Right.
with a copy machine.
What was Ned creating illuminated manuscripts by hand like a Franciscan monk? What was Ned doing?
Well, I don't know. You'll have to tune in next week to find out here
Okay.
on Radio Wasteland.